Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. I think the role cosmic rays are playing here, it's two things. It's a way of having temperature that is driven by star formation, and a way of ensuring that that temperature kind of uniformly heats the galaxy. And one of the reasons that doing this right involves, going back and thinking about it more carefully with a simulation that includes these other effects is because that's not really how galaxies work. That the more we get observational evidence about high redshift, the more it becomes clear that, galaxies don't do things uniformly. That star formation happens at different times in different very specific sites within a galaxy, and that this is somehow important to the way galaxies actually grow. And this is something that comes out of simulations, right? So for this simple toy model, we're not doing that because we don't have that complexity.
Maybe I missed it. Do you have a way to reconcile the predicted excess of high mass stars at high redshift with the observed excess of low mass stars at low redshift in massive galaxies? Do these talk to each other in some way?
So we looked at this in particular because we were thinking about whether there was any evidence in the Milky Way for a bottom light IMF in the past. So this was one of the things that we tried to sort of see whether you could check. What we ended up finding is there are a couple of issues. The biggest one is that stars kind of get tidally stripped, and so it's not clear what the old stellar populations are in these galaxies. Right? So that, for example, if you just look at stars toward the center of the Milky Way, even though you expect that that's a region that has older stellar populations, the stars that you happen to see now toward the center of the Milky Way aren't the same as the stars that were made at the time. And so the only evidence that we saw that you could really check, there was something about carbon isotopic abundances, and that did seem to hint at possibly a top-heavier IMF. But I don't think, at least, I wouldn't claim to be an expert on this, but at least my understanding from the literature that we read on this was that it wasn't possible to just sort of find an old stellar population and see what it looks like.
But there is evidence from older faint dwarfs that they have bottom light IMF.
Yeah.
But then the question is, why would you translate the bottom light to a top heavy IMF? Why don't we just sort of see a connection?
So what I mean by that is simply what we're getting in terms of bottom light AMF is you don't make as many of the low mass stars, right?
You don't need to necessarily affect the high mass. Right?
It's normalized to the same total mass. Right?
Right. In other words, the point is that if you, they're kind of doing the same thing in the sense that per unit star formation, there are more high mass stars. Right. I mean, the point is you're changing what the IMF looks like. You get a greater fraction of high mass stars. I think it's more fair to describe what we're doing here as bottom light in the sense that the physical mechanism is that you're hurting your ability to make low mass stars rather than doing something to enhance the production of high mass stars. That's what the physical mechanism is. But observationally, they're going to look the same. What they're telling you is that a greater fraction of the stars are at high mass, right?
I thought you were changing this over.
So I was specifically thinking of the excess of low mass stars in massive quiescent galaxies, though. Like Peter and Charlie's world, for example.
Yeah. I think that's, yeah.
Because that is in the really compact regions, actually.
Yeah, it's in the center, the oldest regions, ostensibly. So.
Right.
And in the regions that had to have the highest surface density star formation.
So then
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, so I think-
Charles' argument, right? That you have higher temperature.
Well, the argument is that if you have more, if you're actually, if what you're seeing, right, so if what they're seeing is in fact reflective of the IMF, then it would go in the opposite direction. Because in order to produce that, what you need is a bottom heavy instead of a bottom light IMF. The problem is that you also tend to get stars to move around over time. And so if we look in regions even that should have very old stellar populations, we know we're not seeing the entire stellar population. And that's a process which there doesn't seem to be a lot of consensus on exactly what happens. But what it means is it's difficult to translate observations of the central. The point is we know that the central region of the Milky Way doesn't look like the central region of the Milky Way did at the time it was made. And we don't know enough about the details to be able to answer the question of how to translate the one to the other. So I think that's the problem with. But I agree. If what we're seeing in these regions pretty directly reflects the IMF, then it cuts in the opposite direction. This model's wrong. And I think that's completely fair.
All right, let's thank Charles again.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.